Welcome to the Darnell and Cody show, where we talk about social, political, and philosophical issues currently relevant to us as a society. Today, we're going to be talking about the coronavirus, otherwise known as COVID-19, and how primarily the U.S. government has responded to the virus and the impacts on our society. So, first thing I wanted to talk about was the government bailout, which was also a stimulus to the economy, essentially. And my biggest problem with this, um, although I do think that the Trump administration and some of the bills have helped a lot of people and helped a lot of different areas, I have a lot of different issues with the way that they've targeted their bailout and prioritized different things over other things. So, as I was saying, my biggest problem with this is the way that they bailed out these large corporations, um, basically helping them out in an immense amount in comparison to the amount of aid offered to the small business owners, small business workers, part-time workers, basically the average people. Uh, One thing that I have a major issue with that really hasn't been touched on that much by the media, unfortunately, is the fact that younger people between 16 and 20 who uh, are claimed as dependents by their parents don't end up getting the $1,200 stimulus check like the rest of us do. But their parents also don't end up getting that $500 for having that child as a dependent because they're over 16. So this is just a massive oversight by the government to basically forget about people that are rising into either college education and paying off student loans and paying for their college education in general, or entering into the workforce at that age and entering into the workforce in one of the worst times during one of the worst crises, and then not getting the stimulus check like everybody else is in the country is just a complete slap in the face to these people. And I don't know how the government's going to be able to apologize to these young people and their families. Again, the parents aren't getting the $500 either for their children, which is a slap in the face to those parents as well. Um, and as I said, the corporations, uh, it's so easy for them to end up just filing and getting this bailout form. There are reports that the bailout form for companies like the airlines are only a page long, where people that are filing for unemployment checks have to deal with a disaster of a system where even to sign up for it is become a massive hassle due to overflow. And the worst part about it is that people have to fill out these complicated forms with a lot of different information. It can go on for pages and pages of information compared to these massive companies getting millions of dollars in bailouts doing one page. And then on top of doing all this filling out of forms to get the unemployment in the first place, most people end up needing to reclaim unemployment weekly to continue getting their check, where the companies just get this, billion or $1 million bailout, however much money they get foreseen by the government. People have to go through this hassle to basically just make ends meet during this crisis. And admittedly, it's not, a massive deal to have to sign up for this thing, but it's become a problem because, as I said, this website has become massively overflown. So people are having trouble reclaiming their claims weekly because of this website basically not operating properly. And that's the fault of the government. They should be expecting this overflow. They should be trying to do everything they can to get servers running properly, perhaps even getting another website running so people can do this thing on two different kinds of servers. Or I don't know exactly the technical side of it, but obviously they should be making it as easy as possible for people to go through this process, and that's not happening. So the government is having some major issues, in my opinion, in terms of the response here. What are your thoughts there, Darnell?
I agree. I think the general spirit of the stimulus bill wasn't to help people that are actually struggling. It was more so politicized and framed in such a manner that it was supposed to help people that are struggling. But if you look at the actual bill and the actual application, you mentioned the website, you mentioned the corporations, you mentioned that people that are that need it the most and perhaps are not getting the check because of these loopholes and oversights. And you realize that the coronavirus bill is really largely in favor of people that own the power structure that currently exists. And it's always been the case with everything that's going on, but it's despairing. It's extremely anti-populist, and we just really see the reality of our political situation emphasized by this crisis that we are facing. And the Corona stimulus bill, as we know, was delayed multiple times when people were unable to work, unable to pay bills, just so they could, have this mind state of let no crisis go to waste. They're trying to, push their political agendas, even during a situation where people are literally dying and unable to take care of themselves. So it's very disheartening to see, and the whole spirit of the Corona stimulus bill, essentially, and the whole response to it, really, is so politicized. It's really just about this tug of war that we always have, but it's so sad to see that we couldn't come together as a country during this crisis, and even during a life and death situation like this, where people's livelihoods are at stake, we still are playing this political games, political posturing, needless and empty blaming games that we play. We saw a lot of blame going to Trump about his xenophobic claims about banning entry from China and Europe, or calling it the Chinese virus, which had negative repercussions. But it's not helpful right now to be fighting over these things for political points. And like same thing with Trump. Trump's trying to shift the blame on the Democrats, or trying to facialize the virus in some aspects. These things also aren't helpful at all. And meanwhile, people that are really struggling with this virus and struggling and having a hard time, they're left out in the lurch. They're just used literally as a pawn, and they're not looked upon as individuals and humans that really need help when they're the people that need the help the most. So we bail out these corporations to appease stockholders, to prop up this stock market that we so often say reflects how well a country is doing. But in reality, that's just a facade that is maintained by the corporate elites. And you and I, we've talked about this before. Basically, the common average American person is living paycheck to paycheck. I believe it's 70% or higher at this point. And to say that our wealth or how we're doing as a country should be measured by GDP or how well the stock market is doing is insulting. It's like saying that 70% of Americans aren't people, that they don't count, that how they're doing doesn't matter. It's about how the elites are doing. And this Corona stimulus bill, I feel like, really reflects that spirit.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is really almost a slap in the face to the status quo that we've known for a while, where these corporate executives and everybody else that's working in what we would call white collar jobs, basically tech jobs behind the computer and stuff like that, primarily, not all the time. But either way, it's almost become like a white collar quarantine in this country, which is a little bit disturbing in and of itself, because you have the higher paying people being able to work from home or stay from home, basically being excused from their job without any risk of being fired or losing that job after the crisis is over. And then you have the working class that are working for way less money than they should be during this crisis, or they're getting let go from their jobs. And then on top of that, they have no financial security to fall back to, the way that the white collar may have. They might have savings and all this other stuff. So it's the people that are losing their work and stuff that are the ones who are really being the most screwed over by this whole process, because they aren't being given any kind of benefits by these jobs. Like Walmart and Amazon aren't even trying to pay people medical leave, or shutting down facilities when there's a person that's been diagnosed with a virus, and they just have people showing up for work the next day anyway and lying to their employees about it until later. And it's just a horrific kind of situation where we've realized the value of the average worker. People that are going to work at the grocery stores or doing delivery work, these people are the ones who are putting their neck on the line during this situation. And they're the ones who are basically at the most financial risk at all times. And they're still being screwed over financially, is the bottom line. And, I just hope that after we come out of this, people realize that, as I said, the status quo, just trying to value people based on, their basically their class. It's just not working out for our society, and it's going to crumble at some point, I predict. But I just hope that people wake up to this crisis. Andrew Yang was talking about this a lot, where this has basically accelerated the process that automation was going to take over a lot of people's jobs. A lot of people are getting fired and they're not going to get their jobs back, or it's going to just only be part-time work now. So yeah, I just really hope that we see some change societal wise from some people. And this kind of brings me into the next point, unless you have something to add there, real quick, Darnell. Or not real quick if you need time.
Uh, yeah, I'll just add that basically we found out from this crisis that we don't have the scale in place to handle real crisis or crises. And we should be thinking about this mind state that we have, not just as a government, but as people, where we tend to not be prepared. We tend to be complacent and say, "Oh, it's not going to happen." So we didn't stockpile on these supplies that we should have stockpiled. All of our manufacturing is done overseas. So when the ports were closed, we were able to get essential supplies, and we don't make anything in the States anymore, apparently. So we were at a disadvantage there too. So we really, this coronavirus, as bad of a situation as it was, is really should be a catalyst and an opportunity to learn from our mistakes. And we have to learn from our mistakes. We can't let all this lives lost go to waste, and all this suffering go unanswered, just being in vain. We have to learn from this, and we have to realize that we have a real problem with our scale and infrastructure, and how do we handle these kind of situations. The most powerful and wealthiest country in the world should not have the highest mortality and the highest, not the highest mortality, but the most deaths and the most infections. And it just seems like a very poorly handled situation.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of sets me up for my next thing that I was going to bring up, and which is Joe Biden. Unfortunately for us all, Joe Biden has proven himself to be a terrible candidate during this crisis, where he should be appearing as a leader in television, kind of rallying the country, or at least his own party. We have to turn to people like, well, not we, but the Democrats have turned to people like Como. I honestly forget his first name. It's either Andrew or Chris, I believe. But either way, the guy is a laughable progressive at best. He has been exposed multiple times for him espousing corporatist values, putting people that work for corporations at the highest level before the average worker. He's also very strongly for private schools, which aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they are definitely not a democratic thing, especially when he's taking money away from public schools in the process. So to say that the Democrats have rallied around this guy is a little bit of a laughable and problematic issue, to say the least. Um, but going back to Joe, he is just an incapable leader right now. He doesn't have any policies to address any of the crises that have been exposed during this crisis that has hit the whole planet. He doesn't have things to try and fix our supply shortage or try and restructure the middle class. Really, his only solution to that is raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which, as we said in previous podcasts, may end up damaging the middle class more than it helps it, depending on how that all goes and works out with part-time work and small businesses especially. So uh, the fact of the matter is that he is not looking like the leader that we all want to have during this kind of crisis. And as much as I hate to say it, Donald Trump is at least having his face on TV every day for an hour or 2 hours. The guy might be talking belligerent nonsense half the time, but people are liking what they're seeing. And the fact that the Democrats have resorted to this is, I'm honestly so disturbed and perplexed by it that, I don't really call myself a Democrat anymore, to be honest. But, at least there are some people that are trying to do good by the average people. And I've seen that most from the Democratic side. Admittedly, Nancy Pelosi and a lot of these goons are just trying to help out the corporatist values, like we've said before. That's true on the Republican side as well. But there are two Democrats right now, Tim Ryan from Ohio and Ro Khanna from California, who have introduced legislation that's strongly in the spirit of Andrew Yang, and it's actually one of the policies that he's endorsing right now. In the House legislation, they want to pass a bill that gives everyone $2K a month, or $2,000 a month, I should say, until the crisis is completely over. And I think that is the way for us to all continue to function as a nation, make sure people aren't starving to death, make sure people can pay for their housing, and make sure that, they aren't at the bare stress maximum of their budget, basically. We need to give everybody that we can a cushion. And as I said, we cannot screw this up again where we leave people out of this. So in my opinion, it should be blanket $2K a month just to every single American. Maybe over the 16, maybe to 18, but then make sure that you give those parents that $500 check for their kids at least. I'm not sure exactly how to deal with that, but we have to make sure that these 16 to 20-year-olds aren't left out of this, or their parents aren't left out of this, because that's a massive, massive issue and a massive oversight that we had before. So I just totally agree with Yang's here, where you have to revitalize the economy and make sure people are okay at least, and give them the security. So what's your opinion there, Darnell?
All right, a lot of things to unpack there. To start with Joe Biden, there's so many things that I think are wrong with him and the party's decision to push him, and as well as the voting population in general. At the end of the day, we can talk, bad things about Joe Biden all we want, but the reality is that he won the democratic process. So we have to let that sink in for a second and say that this wasn't the elites, this wasn't the democratic establishment. We can sing songs about that, and we can whine about that all we want. The American people, at the end of the day, voted for him by a majority through a democratic process and put him there as the nominee for the Democratic Party. That's a fact. So that you have to just accept that that's our shortcoming there too. As if you were call yourself a Democrat, then that's Democratic shortfalling as a member of the Democratic Party. And of course, we can say, oh, the media skew things in favor of Joe Biden. The establishment put more money behind him. You can say Obama, swung some people's arms, twisted people's arms, and had backphone conversations. At the end of the day, not enough people voted for Sanders. Not enough people voted for Yang, whoever you were supporting. The reality is that Joe Biden won the nomination by a Democratic majority. So after that, we had to look at who we were left with and say, well, we can blame people, but the reality is we picked them, or not like individually as but we as a collective picked them. And if you really look at him with policy, he's not some like beast that the media is trying to portray him as. I feel like not the media, but like a lot of the angry progressives are trying to portray him as. He's actually fairly moderate. Of course, he's a corporatist shill, but who isn't? You don't think Trump is a corporatist shill? Everyone involved in politics is to some degree a corporatist shill, and that's why we wanted someone like Sanders to go in there, even with all his imperfections, to kind of take us out of that loop that we're stuck in. But Biden, if you look at his policies, he's not that bad, right? It's not that crazy that so his worst, I would say his worst policy or his worst history, political history wise, is that he's very pro-China. He's undermining the threat that China poses to us, both economically and militarily. But aside from that, a lot of his policies are very mundane. Basically, the things that most Democrats want, not Democrats as a population, but the Democratic Party establishment wants. For example, like Medicare for all as a public option instead of just blanket universal health care. Something that most Democrat politicians wanted. If you looked at the debate stage, basically only Sanders was in favor for outright Medicare for all, which begs the question of how passable that would have been in the Senate or the House. Probably, it was something that probably wouldn't have passed anyways. And then you look at things like, free college and loan forgiveness, Green New Deal. A lot of these things, again, are going to be really hard to convince a lot of people. When the majority of people don't go to college anyways, why should we subsidize these people that have the opportunity to get a higher education when there are literally people that are working class people that are struggling right now? So now we're saying that we should use that money to subsidize the education of people that had the privilege to go to college. A lot of these things don't really make sense. I mean, of course the money is there. We have more than enough money to pay for a lot of these programs. Just the question is like, how do we spend the money responsibly? And no matter where you go, I don't feel like we're going to spend the money responsibly. You go to the right, you're spending money on needless wars, military-industrial complex, prison complexes. You go to the left, we're paying money on, these pipe dream projects. We have a welfare state. So many things that people want to just spend more money when we as a nation are in tremendous debt. The fairest thing I saw was, me and I both saw where is UBI, put UBI in place, at least give people incentive to get out of welfare and spread the money out evenly if you're going to have these social programs. But back to what I was saying about Biden, essentially, he's not some terrible, like threat that's going to destroy America or something like that, like a lot of the progressives seem to be saying. It's business as usual. And that is horrifying in its own right. But I feel like we're blowing out of proportion. I mean, is it really worse than Trump? And I think only light that he's worse than Trump is on China and his clear mental degradation. I don't want to sound too harsh here, but he's clearly not in the peak of his cognition, and that's worrisome. So we already have like politicians that are so old. It seems like they don't really like I'm fully willing to admit that there's a lot of wisdom that comes with age, but at a certain point you have to really say like you need some new blood in there, some new passion, new energy, people that are more directly invested in the future because they have to actually live in the future. And Joe Biden just doesn't mark the doesn't pass the check on any of these problems that he's facing right now.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I agree with a lot of what you said there. For me, it's not so much the policies for Biden. I like a lot of his policies that he has. They're a little bit more progressive than what Obama was pushing, as we both admit. I dislike a lot of his policies, especially the stuff on the crime, where he's not willing to even uh, make marijuana legalized. Um, my big thing with Biden is two things, and you hit one very well, which is he obviously has cognitive decline. It's not pretty to talk about. We all respect the guy as a politician, or maybe not as a politician, but at least as a human being. And the fact that we even have to talk about this is a little bit unfortunate because people shouldn't have let him get this far. The fact that he has staff that's allowing this to happen is a little bit not right in my mind. And to elect somebody that has cognitive decline is a massive issue for me. And I don't think that he's really going to be running his policy when he's president. I think that people are going to be running their own idea of his policies, or maybe they're not going to really do what he even wants them to do. And he's basically going to be a puppet, which we both have acknowledged. So I think that for me, I would just rather not support any of the candidates right now. I'm hoping that Biden picks some people in his administration that really show a sign to me that he's worth electing. But as just him alone, with what I'm seeing so far, which is a lot of the Obama type administrative people kind of signing on. Obama even recently endorsed him. So it's getting ready to look like just Obama administration 2.0. And yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing for some people, but to me, that's devastating to a lot of people that are working in the middle class and the working class. So there's some good and some bad for Biden, and he can easily win my vote if he does the right things, makes the right nods. But otherwise, I might be staying out of the voting this year. The other thing that's a major problem for me with Biden is that he has his son Hunter that's attached to a lot of stuff that's just so easy to target. It's obviously just standard political nonsense, but it's so easy for Trump to go after politically, and it's really hard for him to overcome that in the general election. In my opinion, it's going to be hard for him to overcome that, and Biden isn't going to be the type of guy that kind of turns the attack back on Trump, where it's like, what are your kids doing? I don't think Biden's going to have the wherewithal, honestly, to be able to do that. So his one major chance of countering a lot of what Trump's damage could be is going to be missed, in my opinion, just because of the fact that Biden is not all there. So I just, like I said, Biden could easily win my vote depending on how he goes about his picking of his cabinet and his VP and all these things. But as it stands, I'm not convinced at all, and I understand why people are not.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I feel like we have no real viable choices. I feel like that's how a lot of Americans feel right now. It's like that classic South Park analogy of douchebag and a Terry sandwich, and we have to just pick one. And I agree with you. I don't think I really am tempted to say, no, I don't want to play this game. I don't see a viable candidate for me. So that probably is what I'm going to end up doing. So I agree with you on that for sure.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's all for us tonight. We will catch you next time with the next episode. Everybody stay safe out there.